My congratulations on stamina to all those who have hung in through a very long Saturday. I think, I don't want to say we saved the best for the last, but we're certainly going to have an interesting evening. A small housekeeping announcement, if I could ask the presenters to be sure and come and pick up any unsold materials and take them home with them so that I don't have to arrange to ship them to Whitehorse or wherever it is that you happen to be. So the brief self-introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill King. I was chairman of the Wilderness Canoe Association in the misty past, and in about 3 weeks I'll be completing 27 years as the WCA secretary, so I think that probably qualifies me as an elder statesman. It's my pleasure to introduce Chris Lepard. Chris and I actually have quite a bit in common, well, apart from the fact that she's young and good looking, but we both have a very high regard for the South Nahanni River, which is a great Canadian icon and surely one of the most diverse paddling trips anywhere in the world. So Chris is going to share some details from her love affair with that river with us tonight.
Thank you, Bill. Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Well, excuse me if my teeth chatter. I've given a lot of presentations, but I never wore my winter coat while I was doing them. But anyway, tonight I'm going to take you down the South Nahanni River. John, my husband, and I have paddled the river 5 times. The first time was way back in 1993, and it was our first canoe trip ever. And we did it in a single canoe. It was a life-altering experience. What did Kevin say? After the bell has rung, you can't unring it. And that's what happened. 25 years ago, I probably hadn't spent more than a couple of hours in a canoe. I'd never slept overnight in a tent, heaven forbid. And if you said wilderness to me, I'd be thinking David Attenborough's Wild Kingdom, you know, where crocodiles are jumping out and grabbing wildebeests. Wilderness, I didn't know anything about it, and it had absolutely nothing to do with me. Then in 1990, John and I went to the Yukon. We rented a camper van, and we drove around for a couple of weeks. And, you know, right there at the edge of the road was the wilderness. And it was everywhere, and it had a powerful and profound effect on me. You might say I heard the call of the wild. Lights. Somebody's yelling lights. Can we have the lights down? Lights. Thank you. So when I got home, I had to find out more about the Canadian North. And I started reading and researching, and in that reading, I discovered the South Nahanni River. And I was just blown away that a place like this could exist in Canada. I mean, I had absolutely no idea. Canyons, this amazing waterfall, twice as high as Niagara, and places with names like Deadman Valley, Vampire Peaks, the Headless Range, and of course, then there was that book, you know, Raymond Patterson's book, The Dangerous River. Well, it's no exaggeration that I became totally obsessed with this river, and I had to go there. Even though I knew nothing about canoeing or wilderness travel, I was going to go to the Nahanni. And in 1993, we made that dream come true, and as I said, we did our first canoe trip ever in a single canoe. So tonight, I'm just going to take you down the river, and I'm going to show you some of our favorite spots and some of the highlights of the river. In case you don't know where it is, it's in the Northwest Territories. I press the right button here. There we are. So here's the Nahanni. This very light green is the original park boundary. It's a national park, which has recently been expanded after 20 years of hard work by many, many people. It's probably the only good thing that the Harper government ever did. If you want a whitewater trip, you start up at the headwaters, affectionately called as Moose Ponds. We started most of our trips down about 120 kilometers south of the headwaters, a place called Island Lakes. There's a variety of ways to access the river. Most of them start at Fort Simpson over here and fly in, but you can come from down here. And another option is, if you're coming to the headwaters, is to fly out of Whitehorse with Alpine Aviation. Doesn't matter how you access the river, it is a spectacular flight over mountains and canyons and tortured riverbeds. So we've flown into the Island Lakes area. Our favorite spot to fly in is there's 3 little lakes in that area. Our favorite to fly into is Honeymoon Lake. On some maps it's called Honeymoon Lake, sometimes it's called Haywire, and it also has some other names, unfortunately. But it's the little lake where the stream goes right from the lake to the Nahanni. That's Ted Grant at the bottom there, the owner of Simpson Air, one of those northern legends, and he's flown us on a number of occasions. So as I said, from that little lake, you just take the stream to the Nahanni. There's lots of beaver dams to pull over and some deadfall, but it avoids doing any kind of portaging. It's always very emotional for me when I first see the river. This is where I made my dreams come true. And for me, it's very much like coming back to an old friend who's been waiting very patiently for me to return and is ready to show me a really good time. Just down from that little stream where we entered the Nahanni is Moore's Cabin. This was built by Joanne and John Moore on their honeymoon, probably about 50 years ago now. The cabin was being maintained by paddlers, but I took this in 2009, and it's really falling into disrepair. I don't know if the park is going to maintain it or not, but you can read their wonderful story in Joanne's book, Nahanni Trailhead. So from here, about 20 kilometers down, there's the only set of rapids all the way down to Virginia Falls, a distance about 220 or 240 kilometers. Those rapids are called Elbow Rapids. They're rated as Class 1. However, every time we've paddled it, it's been very different. So if you're going to paddle that, don't be complacent, because it might be quite a bit more than just a Class 1. And after the rapid, it is not quite clear sailing. Don't put your feet up on the gunnels quite yet. There are submerged logs, there are sweepers, and there's these great big piles of driftwood. About a day's paddle will bring you to one of my very favorite spots on the river, and that's Broken Skull River, a beautiful spot, very scenic, and lots of great camping spots. Right across from Broken Skull are the Vampire Peaks. There they are, like right in your face, elbowing right into the river. When we first started canoeing, we really didn't do very much hiking. We were there to canoe, and also we didn't have a lot of time, but I'd say over the last 10, 15 years, if we don't get a chance to get out and hike, we don't really feel complete. We want to be out on the land, and it gives us a different perspective of the entire experience. This was a great day hike. It's only about 5 kilometers down from Broken Skull, and you could just, on river left, you just hike up and you get this fantastic view. And here's the Vampire Peaks right across from where we hiked up. This is actually a digital painting. I use my experiences and my photographs to create a variety of art, digital and also fiber art. It's just my way of staying in touch with the wilderness and keeping that, that wilderness feeling alive even when you're not there. So from there, it's only about a day's paddle. straight forward to Rabbit Kettle. This is the Rabbit Kettle sign-in station. This is actually where the park boundary started. So if you want, you can just sign in. The sign-in station is sort of like those cairn notes we heard about earlier. People tell their stories there. They don't just sign in. A lot of them will tell of their experiences on the river. If you're ambitious, you can hike back to Rabbit Kettle Lake. A lot of groups start their trip at Rabbit Kettle. It's about 1 kilometer back to the lake. And from there, you can get a really good view of the Cirque of the Unclimables. If you're ambitious, you can even hike over there. Now, you used to be able to get a guided hike at Rabbit Kettle to the famous Rabbit Kettle Tufa Mounds. You'd hike for about 2 hours. And then they had this boat across Rabbit Kettle River. It was kind of a pulley system, so the ranger pulled us across, and we were pulling him across. We've done this twice now. In 2011, an engineer studied this situation, and he thought this was too dangerous for people. It's kind of weird because virtually everybody being pulled across here is going to paddle another 400 or 500 kilometers on, I think, a dangerous river. Anyways, we did have the opportunity to go and see the Tufa Mounds. This is Steve Chatto. He was the ranger and our guide that day. And you were able to actually walk up on the Tufa Mound. You had to take your shoes and socks off. The Tufa Mounds are about 10,000 years old. There's 2 of them there. And you get a great view of the Sunblood Mountain Range and Rabbit Kettle River. So back on the river, it's 2 or 3 days paddle. It's about 120 kilometers down to Virginia Falls. There's always a mixed bag of mountain weather. It's raining, snowing, sunny, all at the same time. And when we were there in 2009, there were also quite a few forest fires, and so we also had smoke. Virginia Falls is a very busy place. You have to have reservations. The limit is 2 days. If they're not busy, they may let you stay another day or 2. There is actually a ranger presence there now. On our earlier trips in the 1990s, there was no ranger presence there, but now they've actually built a cabin there. And I think this all goes with the park expansion. The last time we were there, planes were flying in, bringing more and more, I want to call them tourists, but they're paddlers. I kind of think of it as my Virginia Falls. So there's lots of things to do at Virginia Falls. You can hike up Sunblood Mountain. I can get this right here. So here's John on the scree slopes. So you paddle across the river, but you do it well above. This is a sluice box. You actually do it well above the sluice box. And then you hike through the bush here, up the scree slopes, and all along here. Took us about 7 hours, but it's really worth being up there for the fantastic view down on the river and looking at canyon land. We read in the Virginia Falls sign-in book that some people had made this hike in 2 hours, and we figured they must have been like 15. Couldn't imagine doing it in 2 hours. So the other thing you could do at Virginia Falls is hike along the sluice box. It's actually more stroll along because there's a really good boardwalk all along here. Definitely worthwhile having a look at the sluice box. So this is the beginning really of the falls. Once you get past here, you're toast. So he said you can get a very good close-up view of the sluice box. You can even scramble down here like these people did. This is Mason Rock, at the brink of the falls. There's no trail, there's no official trail going down there. You can go down on the scree and mud slopes, but you do have to be very, very careful. The rocks are very slippery, and people have gone over the falls. So Virginia Falls is the one mandatory portage. And on our trip in 2009, we thought we'd try something new. See these little things here? This is something that sounds really good in theory, and then when you actually do it, doesn't quite work out the way it's supposed to. We have, 350 pounds of gear. I think I told you in another slideshow a few years ago, we have a lot of gear because, a lot of weight because wine is really heavy, You don't want to go on a trip without wine. Anyway, so it was a nice sunny day. We're starting off, and we get about halfway on the portage. There's this really refurbished boardwalk there. We get about halfway, and one of the wheels goes flying off into the muskeg, and luckily John's very handy with his Leatherman and fixed it. But see these wows here and the cleats? And this thing, the boat is 17 feet long. This is 3 feet wide. You got 350 pounds and 2 little wheels. It just didn't work out very well. It took a long time, and I think it would have been faster just to carry all our junk. So it's looking at the falls from the portage trail. The park really did refurbish the boardwalk. It looked really great. But then when you come to the final descent, it's like a goat trail going down. There's John. He's wearing his wetsuit. We do wear dry suits now. On our very first trip, what we did is because we didn't know anything, we didn't even know how to eddy out, or we didn't really even know how to stop the canoe. So we just pointed the canoe downstream into Fourth Canyon, pushed off, and it was very low water. We promptly hit the very first great big boulder at the shoreline. If you've launched from here, you probably know what I'm talking about. Anyways, we were really lucky. The boat just kind of slid over it, and we kept going. On all our subsequent trips, what we did is we walked way up here. We pointed the bow at the falls, and we front ferried a third or halfway across, and then we turned the boat and we headed into the canyon. And that's really the best way, for us anyways, to stay off these cliff faces where there are rocks. When you're heading into Fourth Canyon, it's around class 3 water. It can be bigger if it's high water. And our philosophy it's not really rock dodging. You want to stay upright and not swamp. And our philosophy is keep it straight and brace. Keep it straight and brace, and you won't have any trouble going through Fourth Canyon. Every time we go into the canyon, we want to stop and take pictures. But if it's going really well, we don't want to jinx it, and so we just go straight through, so we never get any pictures of Fourth Canyon. Maybe we'll do that on our next trip. So one of our favorite places to stop once we get past Fourth Canyon is Clearwater. I just love furniture, don't you? I love this drying thing. See this thingy? I wish I had that at home. And John is very handy with bungee cords and his saw, and he made that great park bench that you see there. Nowadays, I have to confess, we just take folding chairs. So when you go back to a river over and over again, a lot of things never change. But some things change so dramatically. They really drive home the power of nature and how, we think we're so in control, but we're really not. This is Hell's Gate, or Figure 8 Rapid. The river comes down here, comes around the corner, over here, and it hits this cliff. And this is from Raymond Patterson's book. And it sets up these 2 great big whirlpools. Well, I think it was around 2007, the river took this whole gravel bar out. And Hell's Gate is no more. Well, the gate is, but there's no rapid. And it was pretty remarkable to have come down here 4 times, portaged, and to come down here, and there's nothing, and you just paddle right through. So this was, again, an earlier shot. And these guys are actually running Hell's Gate, and you can see the size of that gravel bar. So the force, here's a rapid that's been there for hundreds of years, maybe longer, and the river took it right out. Just beyond Hell's Gate, once you're past there, it's not clear sailing. If you have the park information, it says right on it, tricky water at Wrigley's. Well, we've gone down there a few times backwards. That's how tricky it is. And then beyond that, there's a canoe-sucking whirlpool. That's kind of tricky too. But once you get past that area, then you're heading into Third Canyon. And this is pretty straightforward paddling. There's there might be some boils. It is a fast current, but there's no rapids. On one of our early trips, we were there later in the season, and we didn't see a soul on the river, and we're heading into Third Canyon, and then we look, and there's this beautiful honey-colored grizzly bear, and he's coming down the mountain slopes. And when he sees us, he just turns around, and he runs up the scree slopes. This was in the days of film, so here he is in case you can't see him. He runs up the slope and he disappears. And so it was wonderful to see the grizzly bear, but it was also a relief to see that he was afraid of us and he ran away. So we were still talking about that experience, paddled further into Third Canyon, and there was a huge burn area on River Left. And we could see that there was a big bear chasing a caribou through this burn area. And next thing I know, the caribou comes running out of the burn area, jumps in the water, swims in front of the canoe, and catches the current on River Right. So here he is swimming down river, and it didn't take 10 seconds, and that bear was at the shore, and he was looking at us. And then we were astounded. The bear jumped in the water and started swimming after us. Well, I dropped the camera and picked up the paddle and started paddling like crazy. We've never been chased by a bear. And it took about 5 or 6 kilometers. We went around some twists and turns. And, there was the caribou. He was just coming out of the water. And he was so overjoyed to see that we weren't the bear. He jumped in the air at least 4 feet. Look how far, even on this film. And he clicked his heels. It was just... So often when you're paddling, you see evidence that something has happened, but you missed it. And this was one of those serendipitous occasions when we were right there in the thick of it. So likely one of the highlights for most people going through Third Canyon is Pulpit Rock. And there's a huge campsite here. It's overused, but I think most groups stop here. We were very lucky when we stopped here in 2009 that no other group showed up. And you can see John is really happy there, and I can assure you he's not drinking tea or coffee. So you can hike up the canyon wall there, but first you have to get across the river, and then you have to scramble up this rock fall. But all that effort is really worthwhile because you can actually look down on Pulpit Rock and into Third Canyon. So in some of our trips, we never saw anybody. In 2009, we saw a few other paddlers, and we also leapfrogged this group of Canadian cadets, all young people out on their first wilderness trip. In 2009, we had 4 weeks on the river. And we did a lot of really fantastic hikes. We'd stop, if we saw a spot where it looked like it was going to be easy to get to the top, we would set up camp and we would just stay there. So this is in Second Canyon, and this looked like one of those easy ways up to the top, and we climbed for a long time until we were crawling on our knees. And then I kind of have a fear of heights. And when I can't go forward anymore while I'm kind of lying on my belly, then I don't really want to go any further. But anyways, once you get that high, you do get some fantastic views. This is another digital painting, and we're looking upstream in Second Canyon. And this is looking downstream in Second Canyon, just before Deadman's Valley. This is another hike that we did, giving us a really good view into Deadman's Valley. That's the Telegaccio Plateau in the distance. What's really remarkable, this is the first week in September. There is no color on the land. There has been no freezing cold nights. And for most of the 2 weeks that we spent in the canyons, I wore shorts. It was that warm. The Telegatio, another look at it. Every year, every time we go there, we say we're going to hike there, but we've never done it. It's an overnight hike, so that's still on our to-do list. So here we're camped in Deadman's Valley on the Prairie Creek fan. This is a huge fan, lots of camping spots. And we're here because we want to hike back to a beautiful spot called the Hermitage, and it's actually the Prairie Creek Canyon. So it's back in here. So this is a little confusing between river right and river left, but looking at this picture, this is Prairie Creek, and you want to do your hike on this side. Not on this side, because you're going to end up bushwhacking, very unpleasant. So you start off walking on the fan here, and that's just looking back at the Telegatio. It's about a 2-hour hike, very scenic, and then you get to the canyon mouth. Not done yet. Now you got to wade across Prairie Creek, so bring your water shoes. And then you have to clamber up over the canyon wall to get into the Hermitage right here. We've done this quite a few times, and on a couple occasions we did run into bears. So bears are on the fan. One time there was a mother and 2 cubs, so you do need to be alert. And then all that effort is repaid by being in the Hermitage. Just a spectacular spot. You can see, here's John, just dwarfed by the size of the canyon. Here's John down here. We always take our lunch, and I should be making him wear red, shouldn't I? So it sticks out more. So just down from Prairie Creek on river right is the Prairie Creek sign-in station. And this is, again, like a cairn. People, the first time we were there in 1993, the log book, the sign-in book, still had a lot of entries from Bill Mason. It was very poignant to be there reading them. You can leave your paddles there if you find any room. We have our little boat and 2 paddles. And if you ever watched Peter Truman's old series on Canada Parks, he has one on the Nahanni. And actually, his film crew was just coming down the river right behind us, and he filmed our little boat, and it shows up in the segment that he does. And every time it plays, people from Paris call us and say, "Is that really you?" One of the scariest spots for me on the river is as you come into First Canyon. As you enter the canyon, the way the lines on the rocks are, it really looks like you're going down at a 45-degree angle. But not only that, then there's George's Riffle, which can be anywhere from a class 3, 4, 5, just depends on the water level. So there's an island or a big gravel bar just before George's, and we stop and scout it every time. I don't know why, maybe just to scare ourselves silly. So the last time we were standing there scouting the riffle, which was actually in low water, these 2 guys came whipping down, and they paddled through it no problem, and we followed soon afterwards. So First Canyon is likely the most spectacular of all the canyons. There's lots of places to stop and enjoy it, have lunch, camp. You really want to take your time, because really you could paddle through this canyon in a day. It's interesting, some of these spires here, the first time we paddled down in 1993, there were actually a lot more spires, and there's periodic earthquakes, and those spires then disappear. One of our favorite spots in First Canyon is, we call it Patterson's, because there's a spot in Patterson's book where he talks about being in First Canyon, and he runs up a nameless creek, and in 2 hours he's in the high country. We've camped here many times, and one time we hiked for 10 hours, and we never got to the high country. A few years back, I think it was Patterson's daughter spoke here, and she said that her father exaggerated in that book. So it is a very easy hike. It's beautiful. You can see here now we're in the second week in September, and there's a lot of color on the land. And then all too soon, you're out of the canyons. This is Krause's hot spring, and it's definitely worthwhile stopping there and soaking in the hot springs. You'll feel cleaner, but you'll smell like a rotten egg. So from the end of the canyons to confluence with the Lepard is about 120 kilometers. Some groups try to do it all in one day. It is still scenic. We usually take 2 or 3 days, and through a lot of the area, you're going through an area affectionately called the Splits, because the river really splits up, and it's very important to stay in the main channel because you can very quickly be washed off on a side channel, especially if the water is high. So the Nahanni meets the Lepard at Nahanni Butte. The Lepard is a big, powerful river, and when it's placid like this and the weather's good, it's a beautiful, easy paddle. But when it's snowing and sleeting and windy, it can be quite treacherous. From the Butte to Blackstone Territorial Park is about 45 kilometers. So you can take out there. There's road access. We've always paddled down to Lindbergh Landing. This is Lindbergh's homestead, as you can see from the air, and it's owned by Sue and Edwin Lindbergh. Unfortunately, Edwin passed away in 2011. So this is Sue's garden. It's legendary in the north. It's just fantastic. It was such a pleasure to stop there. They were always so hospitable. And Sue is from Hamilton. So it was she had a lot of interesting stories to tell. Last time we were there, we stayed in Dick Turner's old cabin, another northern legend. So many years ago, 1993, when we set off on that first canoe trip, we had no idea that paddling and wilderness travel would suit us so well. But it did. And so over the years, we've done major trips every single year, paddled thousands and thousands of kilometers, and had so many remarkable experiences, seen spectacular things. And it just goes to show you what can happen when you follow your dream. Thanks, everyone. We're going to do